have a confession to make. Venom is boring. Wait. Okay, just hear me out. It's not that I don't get why he's such a popular character, because believe me, I see the appeal. Hell, I even like him on a superficial level. He's the anti-Spider-Man, a shadowy reflection of everyone's favorite wall crawler, a monster born of all Peter Parker's rage and spite. Or at least that's what he's supposed to be. Because for all the pomp and circumstance surrounding the character, I've never felt he lived up to that potential. Like, here's a character with all of Spidey's powers who knows all of his deepest, darkest secrets, and mirrors him visually. He should be his ultimate adversary, his most personal foe, the one who forces the web-swinger to look inward and confront his inner darkness. But I've never felt Venom rises to that potential, at least the original interpretation of the character. At the end of the day, he doesn't really amount to much more than a really big guy who can sneak up on Spidey without triggering his Spidey sense. The fact that they mirror one another physically and aesthetically feels almost incidental a lot of the time, and I find that incredibly frustrating because he should be so much more. So maybe a more accurate confession is that I've never really liked Venom as a foil to Spider-Man. In a rogues gallery filled to the brim with compelling rivals who challenge Spidey both physically and emotionally, Venom has just always been like a massive missed opportunity to me. A villain who, by all rights, should embody all of our heroes' worst traits, his inner demon made literal, but who winds up being little more than a cool aesthetic. But I realize this is an extremely hot take, like all of my Spider-Man takes apparently. I can already feel some of you gearing up to flame me in the comments. But I at least take solace in the fact that I'm not alone in feeling this way. Sam Raimi, the guy who kickstarted all this Spider-Man stuff y'alls loves, yeah. Well, he kind of famously didn't get Venom either. So much so that he was kind of at a loss with what to do when Avi Arad and Sony thrust the character upon him for Spider-Man 3. It was really more just that I didn't understand the character that well. It wasn't close to my heart. The best thing I like about Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's Spider-Man is that they made relatable characters that I understand. Even if they were confused like Norman Osborn, they still have goodness in their heart. They want them to do the right thing. When I read about Venom, which I hadn't read as a kid, I had to catch up on it when they wanted him to be in the movie. I didn't recognize enough humanity within that character to be able to identify with him properly. That's really what it boils down to. Raimi's inability to connect with Venom resulted in him taking significant liberties with the character when adapting him, and you know what? People fucking hated it. So much so that his take on Venom is probably the most controversial part of what is still an incredibly divisive film. But having just had the opportunity to rewatch Spider-Man 3 in theaters, I've come to an important realization about myself. I actually really like Sam Raimi's take on Venom. In fact, putting aside the film's numerous other shortcomings, I'd go so far as to say that it's probably the most interesting I've ever found the character.
What's that smell?
That's a little something called Nice and Easy. What's on you?
Are you sick of smelling like cheap cologne and body spray but aren't ready to commit to designer prices? Well, thanks to this video sponsor, Scentbird, you don't have to. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription that lets you choose a new designer fragrance to try every month for just $17. You shouldn't have to plagiarize a coworker's photographs to just afford designer fragrances, and with Scentbird, you won't have to. They have over 700 perfumes and colognes from brands like Gucci and Prada, as well as indie labels like Skylar and Confessions of Rebel. Every month, you get to pick what you want to receive, so there are no surprises or luck of the draw type deliveries with your subscription.
What's that smell?
Well, I'm glad you asked, JJ, because this month I received colognes from Tommy Bahama, Curatrix, Versace, and House of Beau, with my favorite of those being the Tommy Bahama Maritime Triumph. I am loving this so much. I have been wearing it almost every day. It is the perfect, fresh, nautical, classic, just male summer scent. It's a limited edition fragrance from Tommy Bahama. It's a vibrant, masculine fragrance harnessed by the warmth of the sun and the effervescence of the sea. As they say, it's It's a scent for the man who appreciates freedom and adventure, emblematic of personal victory. It's got hints of mandarin, violet leaves, pimento, cedar leaf, cashmere wood. I mean, this is the shit. I am, no joke, going to buy an entire bottle of this because it smells so good. It's my new obsession. But the best part is, with each fragrance, you'll get a 30-day supply so you can try out scents before committing to a full-size bottle. And you can pause or cancel your subscription at any time, making it a hassle-free experience. So give it a try. Use my coupon code for 55% off at Scentbird. That's just over $7 for your first month for customers in the US and Canada. Again, use my coupon code or click the link in the description or scan the QR code right on the screen for 55% off at Scentbird. That's just over $7 for your first month for customers in the US and Canada. And thank you so much to Scentbird for sponsoring this video. I should probably start by clarifying that I'm not here to tell you you're wrong for disliking Sam Raimi's interpretation of Venom. If you're a fan of Eddie Brock as he was written in the comics, specifically in that early run from the mid to late 80s, and you were disappointed that Spider-Man 3 didn't adapt that version of the character faithfully, that's fair enough. There's really nothing I can say to convince you otherwise because you're not wrong. Raimi's version of Venom only resembles his comic book counterpart in the most superficial of ways. It's a stretch. They're barely the same character. So rest assured, knowing that this isn't gonna be a video about why Spider-Man 3's portrayal of Venom is actually secretly super accurate to the comics. Rather, it's gonna be a video about why I really appreciate the changes Raimi and co made when adapting Venom. Because as far as I'm concerned, Raimi's take is genuinely inspired and fixes what has always been my biggest issue with the source material, that being Eddie Brock himself. When I say Venom squanders the potential of the character's premise, most if not all of that missed opportunity can be attributed to his alter ego. I just think Eddie in the comics is a really boring foe for Spider-Man. I mean, sure, there's something cosmically funny about Spider-Man's powers and deeply held secrets falling into the hands of a man who is the complete opposite of him, a boorish meathead who most resembles the jocks who bullied Peter as a kid than Peter himself. But it doesn't really do much to challenge Spider-Man as a character. The whole point of a character like Venom, a character who mirrors the hero, is that they're supposed to be a foil for the hero, a dark reflection that personifies their worst traits and tendencies. They should present an internal struggle for the hero, as if a physical manifestation of an internal struggle. Yet, Eddie Brock doesn't reflect Peter Parker in any meaningful way beyond his job as a photographer. So when he bonds with the symbiote, it doesn't really amount to much more than, oh no, this big mean moron now has all of Spider-Man's powers and knows his secret identity, which would be a perfectly serviceable threat were he just some random villain. But Venom's not just some random villain. Peter and the symbiote have a history, and Venom is designed to be a shadowy reflection of Spider-Man, a monster made in his image. But Eddie Brock just isn't that. In order for something to be a reflection, it has to somewhat resemble the thing it's reflecting. But while Venom may look like a twisted evil version of Spider-Man, nothing about who Eddie is as a person speaks to that idea. It's a purely superficial parallel, and that lack of substance saps their rivalry of any salience for me. In fact, I think one of the reasons why I love Spider-Man PS1 so much, and the relationship between Spider-Man and Venom in that game, is because, yeah, Venom is an antagonistic figure, but he's antagonistic like an older brother. But like any sibling, you're going to butt heads once in a while, and by Eddie Brock being a big dumb idiot, that's obviously going to butt heads with Peter Parker. So even in that interpretation, while Venom is antagonistic, he's not a villain, and in fact, he and Spider-Man team up in that game to defeat Doc Ock. Venom is very much just a simple, dumb idiot who misunderstood something that he saw, and it just kind of works as a fun little side quest for Spider-Man in that game so you can have him fight Venom. But that brings us to Sam Raimi, the undisputed master of giving Spider-Man villains genuine pathos. What I find so ingenious about Sam Raimi's approach to Venom in Spider-Man 3 is that he not only seems cognizant of the character's shortcomings, but he addresses them directly. Instead of giving us meathead jock Eddie Brock, he goes for something entirely different, completely reimagining Eddie as the anti-Peter Parker. Instead of just a superficial contrast, i.e. Eddie the jock versus Peter the nerd, Raimi positions Brock as the antithesis of who Peter is as a person. Peter is mild-mannered and modest, while Eddie is brash and overly confident. Peter is kind and sincere, while Eddie wears a thin veneer of kindness in order to schmooze those around him. Peter waited to be with the love of his life out of a desire to protect her, while Eddie is possessive and rushes his relationship with Gwen while having a, let's say, cavalier attitude about her safety.
Thank God you're okay.
Daddy!
Hey.
In short, Raimi makes Eddie a genuine foil for Peter, a fact compounded by the casting of Topher Grace, a dweeby-looking nerd, not unlike Tobey's Peter Parker, but with a decidedly douchier edge. However, what really makes this interpretation truly sing is the way Raimi then uses Eddie to interrogate Peter as a character. Because while Eddie initially contrasts with Peter, over the course of the film, we come to realize that Peter is just as prone to the same toxic behavior as Eddie. Capitalizing on the idea that the symbiote exacerbates the host's less desirable traits, a concept first introduced in the 90s animated series, Raimi brings Peter's more toxic traits to the forefront. The longer Peter is bonded with the symbiote, the more his inner demons start to present themselves, and the more he starts to resemble Eddie Brock. He becomes overly confident, smug, and reckless, just a generally off-putting guy trying way too hard to look badass. Unlike the Eddie of the comics, who is just the total opposite of Peter in the broadest sense, Topher's Eddie provides more of a deliberate contrast. He and Peter are different, but in ways that correlate. So when Eddie finally bonds with the symbiote, he becomes the personification of all Peter's most toxic inclinations, the person Peter could become if he gave in to his dark impulses, the person he very nearly became while bonded with the symbiote. Raimi's Venom isn't merely what if Spider-Man, but bad. He's the physical embodiment of the inner darkness Peter struggles with throughout the entire film. All of this toxicity, all of his venom made manifest. In confronting Venom, Peter is forced to confront himself, and at the end of the day, that's what an effective foil is meant to be. One of the biggest issues people have with this version of Venom is that he's barely in the movie. And I guess you can kind of call out the look of Venom. Like, it's just having this weird costume for him, like, I'll give you that. It's not my favorite look for the character, but when we actually get the Venom face in its truest form, I think the Raimi Venom looks pretty sinister and creepy, and it works with everything that I'm kind of talking about here. But aesthetic aside, I think the complaint of Venom really only being in the third act sort of misses the point, because the symbiote is Venom, or more specifically, the darker, more aggressive person Peter becomes while bonded with the symbiote is Venom. So while Venom doesn't become a separate character until the end of the second act, he's a presence throughout the entire movie. And in making Eddie a more explicit reflection of Peter's dark side, he ultimately functions as an extension of Peter, a vehicle for Venom to latch onto so that Peter can physically confront his demons. Rather than simply adopting the story of the symbiote from the comics beat for beat, he streamlines it in order to zero in on Peter Parker as a character. If the black suit exacerbates the darkness within Peter, then Eddie and Venom should externalize that conflict. In reimagining Eddie as a distorted reflection that accentuates his most toxic traits, Raimi does exactly that. So when Peter finally rids himself of the symbiote, only for it to immediately bond with Eddie, it doesn't just feel like the end of one story dovetailing into the beginning of another separate story the way it kind of does in the comics. Instead, it feels like the climax of a single, cohesive story about Peter's descent into darkness and rise out of it. Peter's confrontation with Venom is so much more than just a fight with evil Spider-Man. It's a referendum on the darkness in Peter's heart. This is why the Sandman scene that immediately follows Venom's defeat hits so goddamn hard. Sure, you could probably put that moment before the third act, right after Peter sheds the black suit, and it would probably still play as a nice little character beat. Finally free of the corrupting influence of the symbiote, it would make sense for Peter to make amends with the people he hurt, but it wouldn't feel earned. Before Peter is able to make peace with Flint and forgive him for his past and Uncle Ben's death, he has to do more than simply separate himself from the dark, vengeful impulses that drove his pursuit of Sandman. He has to confront and overcome them. His rage has been the one thing standing in the way of catharsis the entire story, and so the moment can really only happen once you've had Peter confront the physical embodiment of that darkness. By the same token, Peter's reunion with Mary Jane in the final scene of the film feels equally as earned because we've seen Peter reckon with his sins first. Right before the third act, there's a short scene of Peter going to MJ's apartment to apologize, but he can't bring himself to go through with it because deep down, he's still wrestling with the guilt he feels over the way he treated her. But simply stopping abusive behavior is not the same as atoning for it, and Raimi understood this. It's only after confronting Venom that he's finally ready to make amends, because we as the audience recognize what Venom represents for Peter. In a recent interview with The Wrap, Sam Raimi was asked who he'd like to see as the villain in a hypothetical Spider-Man 4, and I think his answer goes a long way toward explaining his approach to Venom.
I think if we were to make a fourth Spider-Man film, we'd probably have to figure out the journey that Tobey Maguire's character would be going on and what obstacles he had to overcome to achieve that growth personally. And I hope that the villain would be chosen based on a representation of that obstacle.
Sure, you could have crammed the more comic book accurate version of the character into Spider-Man 3, and maybe that would have made a lot of people very happy, but I think it ultimately would have run into the same issue the comic book character does, which is that Eddie Brock as Venom doesn't pose a personal challenge for Peter. He's a purely physical threat, a hulking brute with all of his powers with none of his sense of duty and responsibility. He knows all of Peter's secrets and can use the knowledge to torment him, but nothing about that fact forces Peter to confront something about himself. If anything, he kind of affirms Peter. And while that surface-level antagonism is fine when the villain is a souped-up thug like Rhino or Electro, it's just a tad underwhelming when it feels designed to reflect the hero's inner darkness. Raimi's Venom capitalizes on this potential, and Spider-Man 3 is all the richer for it, in my opinion. Which isn't to say the film executes its bold new vision for Eddie flawlessly. Far from it, in fact. While I think Topher's characterization is fascinating and greatly enhances Peter's emotional arc, I'll be the first to admit he occasionally feels a little sidelined. There's just so much going on in Spider-Man 3, and Eddie frequently gets lost in the shuffle, which somewhat obfuscates the parallel being drawn between him and Peter. Looking at stuff cut from the film, such as several sequences that found their way into the official novelization, it's clear there was an intention to have Eddie's fall from grace mirror Peter's more explicitly, including a scene where he shows up at Captain Stacy's home after being fired from the Bugle. The scene really punctuates how toxic Eddie's fixation on Gwen is, with him completely disregarding how uncomfortable he's making her. It's a great little character beat that deepens Eddie's fall and foreshadows Peter's toxic behavior towards MJ in subsequent scenes. Editor Bob Murawski has explained that moments like this were ultimately cut for pacing reasons, which makes sense. Again, the film already has too many balls in the air as it is, particularly in the second act, but it would have gone a long way towards giving Eddie more of a consistent presence in the film. At the end of the day, Spider-Man 3 is still a broken movie, a very broken movie. There's really no way around that fact. Hell, it's not even close to being one of my favorite Spidey flicks. It's probably towards the bottom of that list. But I really don't think Raimi's approach to Venom is part of that problem. Over the years, I've seen people go so far as to claim that Sam deliberately fucked up the character to spite Sony, which feels incredibly disrespectful. Sure, it's no secret Sam Raimi didn't want to use Venom and didn't understand the character, But that doesn't really seem to be a problem exclusive to him. Look at every other major adaptation of Venom. Everything from Insomniac Spider-Man 2 to Spectacular Spider-Man to the Tom Hardy Venom films. They've all felt the need to alter this character in one way or another to make him work as an antagonist, or in the case of Tom Hardy's Venom, not make him a Spider-Man villain at all. So the writers adapting him have to find new ways to make him more compelling, whether that be by having the symbiote bond with a character who has more of a relationship with Peter, like Harry Osborn, or making Eddie a contemporary of Peter's in school, or getting rid of the Spider-Man element altogether and just having Eddie and Venom as a kind of Jekyll and Hyde situation. Hell, even look at the animated series, which first introduced the idea that the symbiote amplified Peter's worst traits. All of these adaptations feel designed to fix the problem that is Eddie Brock, and Sam Raimi's iteration in Spider-Man 3 is no different. If anything, I think Raimi's approach feels incredibly respectful. Rather than just shoving the character into the film based on a mandate with little care or effort, Raimi makes a genuine attempt to incorporate the character into his world and turn him into a Sam Raimi-esque villain, for lack of a better term. Sam Raimi may not have wanted to include Venom, but he sure tried his hardest to make him work, and I think at the end of the day, that's the most respect you can show the source material when working on a production of this scale. So yeah, Spider-Man 3's Venom rules, guys, and if you can't make peace with that, find religion. Hey, thanks guys for checking out this video. It's been a lot of fun to really dig into Venom and Eddie Brock and put my feelings about that character out there in a way that coincided with the re-release of Spider-Man 3, which is a film I don't love, but you know, it's got some good stuff going in there, mainly the symbiote suit and Venom and Eddie Brock, as we've discussed in this video. Thank you so much to our channel members for supporting the channel on that level. If you're interested in that, you can check that down in the description below, and thank you so much to Scentbird for sponsoring this video. Seriously guys, I love them and I love their service. I've been using it for the past couple of months, and it's really opened me up to some new fragrances I perhaps wouldn't have tried otherwise. So be sure to check out their awesome service by clicking the link in the description below. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.